Here's the 600-word immersive opening scene, written in cinematic, emotionally grounded slow burn style, ready for YouTube narration. Variant, standard, title, Her touch said everything her words couldn't. Part 1, the beginning. ID, 54721. She didn't have to say anything. Her hand brushed mine once, barely, maybe by accident, and the whole room changed. It was one of those quiet evenings that never meant to become a memory. A few of us had gathered after work, low music, dim light, nothing special. But she was there, sitting across from me, her posture calm, the kind of calm that made you aware of your own restlessness. She was older, mid-40s maybe, though you couldn't tell from the way the light moved on her skin. Everything about her was unhurried. Even when she laughed, it came out like she'd learned to ration her joy, like every smile had to be earned. I was just listening. Or pretending to. I remember the condensation on my glass, the hum of the fridge, the way her gaze flickered toward me and away again, quick but deliberate. Like she was checking something she didn't want to find. When she finally spoke to me, it wasn't about anything that mattered. Just a comment about the playlist, a small talk kind of thing. But her voice, low, quiet, it had that steadiness that made you want to lean in just to hear what she'd say next. I tried to sound casual. I wasn't. My replies came out a little too slow, my smile stayed too long. At one point she reached for a napkin beside me, and her fingers grazed my wrist. Not a full touch, just contact, a second maybe less. But I swear something in me short-circuited. I looked up, and she didn't pull back right away. Her eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. Then she smiled, small, knowing, like she just caught a secret between us and decided not to name it. For a while, we said nothing. The music filled the gaps. Everyone else had drifted into their own corners of conversation, but I couldn't stop noticing her. The tilt of her glass. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The faint lines around her eyes that made her expression softer, more real. "Are you always this quiet?" she asked finally, almost teasing. "Only when I'm trying not to say something stupid," I said. She laughed, quietly, but there was warmth in it, like a door opening a crack. "Then you're doing fine." Her tone carried something else, though. Not flirtation, not yet. It was caution, maybe? Or curiosity. And still, her gaze lingered. Long enough to make me wonder if she was thinking what I was. Later, when people started leaving, I caught her alone in the kitchen, rinsing a glass. The sound of water was the only thing between us. "You don't have to help," she said without looking at me. "I know," I said. "But I want to." She dried her hands on a towel, turned slightly, and for a moment we were close enough that I could see the faint perfume clinging to her wrist, something floral, understated. Her breath hitched, or maybe mine did, and the silence that followed felt too heavy for what it was. Then she said softly, almost like a confession she didn't mean to share, "You should be careful being kind like that." "Why?" I asked. She looked at me then, properly, directly, and there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Something warm. Something warning. "Because some people might take it the wrong way." And before I could ask what she meant, there was a knock at the door. She glanced toward it, then back at me, the smallest hesitation, a moment suspended between what we were and what we could be. "Could you get that?" she said, her voice steady again, almost too steady. I nodded, but I didn't move right away. Because for that one breath before the interruption, before the knock, before the world came back, her touch had already said everything her words couldn't. Would you like me to carry the same tone and narrative pacing into part 2? The first shift, subtle realization, 600 words. Or adjust the mood slightly, more warmth, more restraint, etc., before we continue? I saw her again the next afternoon. Not by chance, I told myself that, but I knew it wasn't true. She was sitting alone in the cafe across from the studio, a book in hand, sunlight falling across her shoulder like it had been placed there on purpose. When she looked up and caught me watching, she smiled faintly, polite, almost distant, and yet something in her eyes said she remembered too. I joined her. She didn't invite me, but she didn't stop me either. For a while, we just talked. Harmless things, work, weather, how the coffee was too bitter. But under it all was that same quiet current I couldn't ignore. Every glance felt longer than it should be. Every silence said more than it had any right to. She told me she used to teach art, she said, tracing the rim of her cup with a finger. Then I stopped. Life rearranges your plans sometimes. Her voice softened at that, and I could tell she didn't mean to go deeper. I wanted to ask what had changed, who had left, what had hurt her, but she gave me that practiced half-smile again, the kind that ends a subject before it begins. I told her I worked odd hours. Freelance jobs. Nothing stable yet. She nodded like she understood, though maybe she just remembered being that age, wanting to prove yourself, unsure who you're trying to prove it to. When the waitress brought her check, she reached for her purse, but I covered it with my hand before she could. Our fingers touched, not the accidental kind this time. She froze, just for a heartbeat. Then she said quietly, "Don't." Her tone wasn't sharp, more like a plea she couldn't explain. I pulled my hand back. "Sorry," I murmured. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the table. "You don't need to be sorry. You just don't know what you're doing." I almost laughed, but her expression stopped me. She wasn't teasing. She looked up, and her gaze softened again. "You remind me of someone. Too kind. Too young to know it's dangerous." That word, dangerous, stayed between us like smoke. I leaned back, pretending to study the street outside, but I could still feel the warmth from where our hands had met. I wanted to say something, anything, to pull her back into the moment, to break the invisible rules she kept drawing between us. Instead, I said, "You make it sound like kindness is a crime." "Sometimes," she said, eyes narrowing slightly, "it can ruin you." The air between us thickened again, heavy, familiar, unspoken. When we stood to leave, she adjusted her scarf and brushed against me as she passed. Her hand rested on my shoulder, light, deliberate. "Take care," she said. Her perfume lingered long after she was gone, soft and impossible to forget. I didn't move until the chair beside me grew cold, wondering if she'd meant goodbye or see you again. Either way, her touch stayed, like a promise either of us had the courage to keep. The third time we saw each other wasn't planned. It never was. But it kept happening, like the world was running out of coincidences. She was helping set up an exhibit at the studio, a charity thing, crowded with people who spoke too loudly about art they didn't understand. I was there to help with lighting, cables, the kind of work no one notices unless it goes wrong. She noticed. "Careful," she said when I nearly tripped on a wire. Her hand caught my arm, steady, firm. The same warmth as before. "You'll kill yourself trying to fix what's already fine." I smiled. "Maybe I like fixing things." Her eyes held mine a moment too long. "That's what worries me." Someone called her name, a man's voice. I stepped back as she turned toward him, professional smile in place. He was around her age, confident, the kind of man who assumed he belonged in every room. She laughed at something he said, polite, practiced, but her glance flicked toward me once. Quick. Sharp. Enough to keep me from leaving. Later, when most people had filtered out, I found her in the side gallery, checking the lighting again. Alone. "You missed a spot," I said quietly. She looked up, surprised, then smiled, softer this time. "You again." I could say the same. We stood there, only a few feet apart. The lights cast long reflections on the glass frames, soft gold on her skin. She reached to adjust one of the paintings, and I stepped closer to help. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved. "Do people ever misunderstand?" I asked, my voice lower than I meant. "About what?" she said, not turning. "This," I said. "Whatever this is." She hesitated, then let out a slow breath. "They would. That's why it can't be anything." I almost said, "but it already is." Instead, I just nodded, though my pulse wouldn't slow. A phone buzzed, hers, the sound sharp in the quiet room. She checked the screen, frowned, then silenced it without answering. I should go. I should have stepped back, given her space. But I didn't. When she turned to leave, she stopped, inches away. The air changed again, heavy, charged. Her breath brushed against my jaw as she looked up at me. You shouldn't look at me like that, she whispered. How do I look at you? Like you're not afraid to. The words landed somewhere deep, dangerous. My hand almost found hers, almost, but she moved first, reaching up to smooth the edge of my collar instead. Her fingers lingered there, just long enough for me to forget where we were. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway. A voice, the same man from earlier, calling her name again. She stepped back quickly, her face composed, her tone even. You should fix that light, she said, though neither of us cared about the light anymore. When she walked past me, her sleeve brushed my hand, soft, fleeting, but enough to leave a trail of heat that refused to fade. By the time the man entered the room, smiling, asking if she was ready, I was already pretending to be busy again. But as she turned at the doorway, just for a second, her eyes found mine, and everything unsaid burned quietly between us. The next time, it wasn't the gallery or a cafe, it was raining, sudden and heavy, and we both reached the studio door at once. She laughed when she saw me, a small, breathless sound. You again, she said, brushing the water from her hair. Looks like fate's running out of hiding places, I said. Inside, the lights were dim. The smell of rain clung to us, damp and close. She took off her coat, draped it on a chair, and for a moment, the silence was louder than the storm outside. I asked if she wanted tea, anything to do with my hands, and she nodded. But when I handed her the mug, her fingers stayed around mine just a fraction too long. The warmth bled through both our palms, and neither of us spoke. She looked tired, not from the day, but from the holding back. There were faint shadows under her eyes, and when she smiled, it didn't reach all the way. Long day? I asked. She gave a quiet laugh. Long life. I wanted to reach out, to touch her face, to trace the drop of water that had slipped from her hairline down her neck, but I didn't. I just stood there, pretending I wasn't watching her every movement. You shouldn't keep looking at me like that, she said again, softer this time. I've tried not to, I whispered. Her eyes met mine, something trembling behind them. Then stop trying. She stepped closer, slow, deliberate. The air seemed to shrink around us, thick with something unnamed. Her perfume, faint, floral, rain-soaked, surrounded me. Do you ever think, she said quietly, that some people come into your life just to test what you're made of? Maybe, I said. Or maybe they come to remind you you're still alive. Her breath caught. You shouldn't say things like that. Then tell me to leave, I said. She didn't. Instead, she reached up, fingers brushing the side of my neck, light, trembling, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to want it. My pulse jumped beneath her touch. She felt it, and her hand lingered there, her thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I leaned in before I could stop myself, just close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. Her eyes closed. This isn't supposed to happen, she whispered. Then why does it feel like it already has? For a heartbeat, the world fell away, the rain outside, the rules, the reasons. She tilted her head slightly, her lips parting just enough, and then, a sharp knock. She froze. I stepped back. The door handle turned, a voice calling her name, familiar, too close. She exhaled hard, eyes still on mine. Don't say anything, she mouthed. I nodded, chest tight, the nearness still buzzing through my skin. As she moved toward the door, she paused, just long enough to whisper under her breath. You make it impossible to forget what I'm trying not to feel. Then she opened it, and the moment shattered, leaving only the echo of what almost was. I didn't see her for days after that night. The knock, the voice at the door, it had left something raw between us. When she finally called, it was brief. We need to talk, she said. No greeting, no warmth. Just that. She asked me to meet her back at the studio, empty now, the paintings gone, the walls bare. Her footsteps echoed before I saw her. She was standing by the window, arms folded, a storm behind her eyes. You told him, she said quietly. What? The man that night. You spoke to him after I left. I shook my head. I didn't. I barely said a word. She searched my face like she could read the truth there, then sighed. He asked questions? About you. About us. Her voice broke slightly on the last word, us. I told him nothing, I said, stepping closer. Because there's nothing to tell. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. Is that what you believe? That if we don't name it, it doesn't exist? Her tone wasn't anger, it was fear disguised as control. I felt it in the way she kept her distance, the way her hands trembled when she finally lowered them. What did he say to you? I asked. She looked away. He said he could see it. The way you look at me. The way I. She stopped, exhaled. He called it inappropriate. The word hung there, heavy, wrong. I took another step, close enough now to feel the air move between us. Is that what you think? She didn't answer. Her throat tightened, a pulse flickering beneath her skin. He's not anyone to you, I said softly. You don't owe him explanations. You don't understand. She whispered. He was my husband. We're not together anymore, but... The confession hit like static in the air. Her ex-husband. The man in the gallery. The one who had called her name that night. He still thinks he can protect me, she said, her voice trembling now. From mistakes. From myself. I reached up, almost without thinking, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't move, not away, not closer, just stood there, eyes glassy, lips parted slightly. You're not a mistake, I said. For a long moment she didn't breathe. Then she stepped closer, not enough to close the gap, but enough for her breath to mix with mine. Don't make me believe that, she whispered. Because I already do. Outside, thunder rolled, low and distant. She looked at me like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't unsee. Tell me to stop, I said. I can't. Her fingers brushed my arm, tracing down until her hand caught mine. She squeezed once, hard, as if anchoring herself to the wrong thing at the wrong time. And then, as if realizing it, she pulled away. You should go, she said, but her voice betrayed her. I didn't move. Neither did she. The storm outside cracked open the sky, and for a single, suspended heartbeat, we stood there, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. That night, the storm didn't stop. It followed me home, the kind that makes you feel watched by the world. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop hearing her voice saying, I can't. By morning, I was already at the studio again. I didn't plan it. My body moved before my mind caught up. She was there. Of course she was, sitting by the window, the same one where we'd stood before. She looked like she hadn't slept either. A cup of untouched tea, cold beside her. When she saw me, she didn't act surprised. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I tried not to be. Her breath hitched, a soft, broken sound. You don't understand what this costs me. I stepped closer. Then let me share it. She shook her head. You think it's that simple? No, I said. But it's real. That word, real, pulled her eyes to mine. The space between us was small now, too small to keep pretending. I could see the faint rise and fall of her chest, the tremor in her hands as she gripped the edge of the chair. Say it, she whispered. Say what you came here to say. I swallowed hard. That I can't keep pretending this isn't happening. She closed her eyes, as if the truth itself hurt. You're younger. People will talk. They already do. I don't care. You should, she said, but she didn't sound like she believed it. I took one more step. The air between us grew warmer, tighter. She rose from the chair slowly, her body close enough that I could feel her heat, the faint brush of her sleeve against mine. This isn't fair, she whispered. Nothing about this has been, I said. Her hand came up, maybe to push me away, maybe to hold me still. It landed on my chest instead, flat against my heart. I could feel her pulse through her palm, quick and uneven. Every time you're near, she said, I forget what I promised myself. I reached up, fingers brushing her hair back from her face. The movement felt fragile, final. Then stopped remembering. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Her forehead touched mine, barely, her voice a whisper between us. If I let this happen, I won't know how to stop wanting it. Then don't stop. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, trembling, alive. We stood there, her breath against my lips, my hands at her waist, the world outside still breaking with rain. And just before the space between us disappeared, she whispered, Now you know what it's like, to want something you shouldn't. Then she pulled back, only an inch, but enough to leave air where there shouldn't have been any. Our eyes met, no more hiding, no more pretending. We finally understood what this was, not a mistake, not an escape, but a choice neither of us could undo. Outside the storm eased, but neither of us moved. The air between us still burned with everything said, and everything waiting to be. Morning light spilled softly through the studio windows, pale, forgiving, quiet. The storm had passed, but it left that strange kind of calm that feels like a question waiting to be answered. She was sitting on the floor this time, barefoot, a paintbrush between her fingers even though the canvas before her was blank. I stood by the doorway, unsure whether to break the silence, or let it keep us safe for a little longer. When she finally spoke, her voice was low but steady. You came back. I nodded. You didn't tell me not to. A faint smile tugged at her lips, tired, honest. I almost did. I crossed the room slowly, careful not to step on the scattered brushes and empty mugs that mapped the floor like her thoughts. The closer I got, the more I could see it, the sleeplessness in her eyes, the fight between reason and want. Do you regret it? I asked quietly. She looked up at me, searching. You mean us? I hesitated. Whatever this is. Her fingers stilled around the brush. No, she said finally. I regret how afraid I was to feel it. Something in my chest broke open at that. I knelt down beside her, close enough for our knees to touch. The scent of turpentine and rain still hung in the air, but beneath it, her. Warm, familiar, impossibly grounding. I don't know what comes next, I admitted. Neither do I, she said, her eyes softening. But maybe we don't need to know yet. We sat there, quiet, letting the light fill the space that once held every unsaid word. My hand found hers almost by accident, or maybe not. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm up and threaded her fingers through mine. Her thumb brushed against my skin, slow, thoughtful. I used to think wanting something like this made me reckless, she said. But now I think it just makes me alive. I smiled, small, helpless. Then stay alive with me. She laughed softly, that laugh I hadn't realized I'd missed until then, and leaned her head against my shoulder. For the first time, there was no tension, no hiding behind what-ifs. Just the sound of her breathing, the gentle tap of her heartbeat against my arm. Outside, the clouds finally broke open to sunlight. The world didn't end. It just kept going. She tilted her head slightly, her lips brushing the edge of my jaw. Not a kiss, not yet, but a promise. You know, she murmured, I used to think I was too old for beginnings. I turned to her. Maybe this isn't a beginning, I said. Maybe it's the moment we stopped pretending we didn't already start. Her eyes met mine, and this time, there was no hesitation. The distance closed easily, naturally. When she kissed me, it wasn't about possession or rebellion. It was about recognition, two people who had finally stopped running from what they already knew. And for once, everything felt quiet, right, and real. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?